Good afternoon, our viewers, and welcome to CSI-Africa Cyber Talk Show. This is our inaugural show to talk about cybersecurity issues. And just to give a background about what's happening in the field of cybersecurity and why we have decided to have this show. In today's digital world, where cybersecurity issues have become critical, concern for individuals, businesses, and governments alike. With cyber threats evolving rapidly and becoming increasingly sophisticated, there is a pressing need for heightened awareness and proactive measures to safeguard against cyber attacks. And therefore, recognizing the importance of cybersecurity education and awareness, CSI Africa is proud to introduce the CSI Africa Cyber Talk Show. Why is this talk show important? One is to educate and create awareness among the public about cybersecurity issues. Two, to provide valuable insights, guidance, and practical advice on cybersecurity best practices. And three, to foster collaboration and knowledge sharing among cybersecurity professionals and stakeholders. And finally, we look to support the efforts of the government of Kenya and other stakeholders in enhancing cybersecurity across the various sectors of our economy. Our mission for this show is to empower individuals, businesses, and governments with the knowledge and tools necessary to effectively protect against cyber threats through engaging and informative discussions on this platform. So next, I want to welcome our guest today. Our guest will introduce himself, and then we'll proceed with the discussion. Welcome.
Good afternoon. My name is Dr. David Njoga. I'm the head of Cybersecurity Policy and Standards at the National Computer and Cyber Crimes Coordination Committee. I am happy to be in this show to talk about matters of protecting Kenya cyberspace. I look forward to interesting discussions. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Njega. To start with, we'll give a brief overview of the cyber threats and events that happened in the last quarter of 2023 and comparing that with what happened in the previous quarter, that is July-September 2023. Now, the CSI detected over 1.2 billion cyber threat events. This represented 943.01%. This was an increase from 123 million threat events detected in the previous period, that is July to September 2023. In response to the detected cyber events, the National CSI issued about 8 million advisories between the period October to December 2023, and this represents about 44% increase compared to the 5 million advisories that were issued during the previous period, that is July to September 2023. Now, looking at the cyber attack vector trends, mostly what had been reported by the CSI, system attacks, malware attacks, brute force attacks, and web application attacks, and mobile application attacks. And if you look at mobile, I think it's due to the penetration of the mobile devices in the country. A lot of people are now connected to the internet through their mobile devices, and thanks to the government for that increasing the connectivity levels within the country. Now, out of those, I'll just pick a few and look at the trends. And malware trends for that period, September-December, the malware threats that were detected were about 13,221,698. And this represented an upward trajectory from the previous period, and this represents about 75.94%. Out of this, for the malware trends, advisories issued were 781, 561,000, and this is also an increase. It represents 397.87%. We also have the web applications attacks. Threats for the web applications that were detected during that period were 72,536. That was an increase of 31.96% compared to the previous period. And for that, advisories that were issued were about 200,041, which is about 16%. And then after that, I'll also look at another report by Seriano. We are all aware that Seriano does annual cybersecurity reports to look at the threat landscape in the country. So according to Seriano, we have the ransomware attacks. In 2022, 76% of organizations were targeted by ransomware attacks. And out of these, 64% were actually infected. So that's a big number. In the supply chain attacks, we had about, out of 1,322 chief executive officers of different organizations, 76% of them believe that protecting their partner ecosystem and supply chain is just as essential as building their own security infrastructure. And that report was extracted from a report that was done by KPMG. The other bit on this report is on the social engineering and phishing. And approximately 88% of organizations encounter spear phishing attacks within a year. And we know that when it comes to social engineering and spear phishing, we have the business email compromise that mostly is targeted at the chief executive officers of various organizations. Then from this report as well, we have the advanced persistent threats, which they say that in 2024, the APTs may continue to evolve and target critical information infrastructure. We'll get to that later. Then they also looked at the Internet of Things, that is IoT vulnerabilities. In this report, IoT malware cases are skyrocketed by 87% to 112.3 million cases that were reported for that year. Where everyone is talking about artificial intelligence today, and also it helps with the automation of tasks, and the cybersecurity domain is not left behind. But then there is the negative side of it, artificial intelligence based attacks on the cybersecurity domain. So in this report, there was an increase on people have been discussing about artificial intelligence and how it can be integrated into our systems. But then the report says that organizations with fully deployed security, artificial intelligence, and automation technologies experienced damages of about $3.05 million. This is, they say it's cheaper compared to organizations without such deployment. So if you're an organization and you've deployed artificial intelligence technologies, remember that the bad guys are outside there, and we have what we call the AI-based attacks. So you need to be careful. There is also the mobile device vulnerabilities. And here they say the severity and probability of these threats can change over time, and different organizations, industries may have varying levels of exposure to the vulnerabilities. So that is an overview. I don't know what you have to say about the overview before we now delve into our discussion.
I think those are very rich reports giving the landscape of Kenya, Africa, and the globe, because as we are aware, that indeed the trajectory of cyber attacks is on the rise. Again, there are many factors that could contribute to that. One is we see a lot of adoption of digital transformation agenda by governments, private entities, as well as individuals. So that increased digitization of systems, adoption of automated systems and processes and so on is one of the reasons that has improved or increased the digital footprint, which of course goes with the commensurate threats. The other thing is that I think cybercrime is also one of the soft crimes that is escalating globally for various motives by the actors. So it is true that the technologies that we are adopting come with vulnerabilities, especially the new ones, like we just mentioned, artificial intelligence. For Kenya, especially the report by the KSAT, yes, the figures are high. And if I look at it from the previous quarter, well, there's a major increase. But I would like to attribute the major increase in the figures due to, an enhancement of reporting. Reporting was never emphasized before. Therefore, we never used to get accurate or adequate statistics. So with more emphasis on reporting, which is a requirement for having a proper situation awareness of the landscape. I think upon the adoption of the government's agenda of digitization, reporting was enhanced. That is why you are able to have better visibility of the threat landscape. In terms of the attack vectors, of course, we see, not only in Kenya but globally, we see a lot of attacks based on distributed denial of service as well as ransomware. I think ransomware is the most common one. Yeah, but those two are leading, and of course, malware is a weapon that is used in all these attacks. So I think those reports provide a good landscape or a good platform for us to reflect in terms of where we are as a country, what are the initiatives that we are taking, and where we need to go.
Thank you. You've mentioned something that is very important in the cybersecurity space, and that is information sharing and reporting. I think I'm happy that organizations have started reporting, and therefore we have some good data that we can use for research and all that. And I think thanks to the government for improving their efforts on reporting cybercrime cases, and the other organizations and stakeholders in this field. Now, Daktari, let's now look at the government. Okay, Kenya is ranked as the third most targeted country in Africa, trailing South Africa and Nigeria. I think maybe it's because of the population and also the uptake of the digital technologies in Kenya. The government so far has done so well, quite a number of policies, strategies, and in terms of the regulations that they've done. Now, I want us to look at the regulatory landscape in Kenya and how it's helping us to protect our cyberspace. Now, maybe if you can just take us through an overview of this regulatory landscape in Kenya and what it is about.
Okay. Yeah, thank you, Alex. Cyberspace is we call it a new domain, but it's been with us for many years. We say it's a fifth domain of warfare and other economic activities besides the other domains of land, air, sea, space, and others. So again, it's one area that is interesting because it is cross-cutting across all disciplines. Then it is also encompassing all the other domains. So upon proper, categorization and visualization of cyberspace as a domain for the economy, it has been assessed, and I think it is right to say that it is a security concern. So cyberspace is really a security concern, and therefore the protection of cyberspace is looked at from the security perspective. In Kenya, just like in many other countries globally that have attempts to secure their cyberspace, one of the controls or one of the interventions is legislative or legal interventions. For Kenya, cybersecurity is looked at as a security concern, like I mentioned, and therefore the overarching law for protection of cyberspace is actually what we call the Computer Misuse and Cybercrimes Act, which is of 2018. Which is a security law, and it is embedded under the Ministry of Interior and National Administration. That's deliberate because of the security aspects of it. If you look at that again, that the activities that go with cybersecurity protection are around investigations. They are also around, mutual legal assistance and collaboration, both locally and internationally. It goes around the technical platforms, which are about controls of systems which are held by various entities in the economy, from infrastructure, from utilities, financial systems, and so on and so forth. So Kenya's approach is a stakeholder approach, what we call the multi-agency framework. So we look at a collaborative legislative framework which brings together various entities. So in Kenya, we have the National Computer and Cyber Crimes Coordination Committee, that is NC4, which is a multi-agency framework for coordination of all matters of cybersecurity. So through this framework, it brings together various laws and legislations, as well as regulations around technology, around national security, and around other operations in the financial sector, utility sector, and so on and so forth. So we look at the overarching law, which is the CMCA of 2018, but it also brings other entities together within the framework of NC4 who are also acting within the various legal mandates, such as the Kenya Defence Forces, that is mainly tasked with the responsibility of defending the sovereignty of this country, and therefore defense of cyberspace mandate ultimately from foreign or state actors belongs to Kenya Defence Forces. The issues around crime, cybercrime, investigations, and so on, again, that is a mandate that is for the National Police Service through its organs, such as the Directorate of Criminal Investigations and others, because these actors go beyond the borders. Therefore, we also bring in the Ministry of Foreign and Diaspora Affairs, as well as the Judiciary or the State Law Office, where some of these crimes or actors are beyond the borders, and therefore it's important to engage the State Law Office and the local, regional, and international investigative agencies for the purpose of that. So we have quite a broad spectrum of legislation. For the Kenyan space, again, apart from the laws and regulations by the other entities, NC4 has recently complemented the efforts with the publishing of this critical information infrastructure and cyber crimes management regulations 2024. These are new regulations to complement the existing efforts, and we believe it's going to fully operationalize the activities around cyber crimes management, protection of critical infrastructure, as well as enhancement of regional and global collaboration for investigations and prosecution of cyber crimes.
Thank you so much, Daktari, for that in-depth overview about the regulatory framework in Kenya. Now, you mentioned about the critical infrastructure, but I want to take you back again of a document that NC4 came up with. I think it was a bit 2022 or last year, about the national cybersecurity strategy. Could you please tell us more about it?
Yeah, thank you. Overall, all the efforts of cybersecurity management are anchored in the national cybersecurity strategy. For Kenya, I think we are boasting of having one of the best national cybersecurity strategies in Africa, having been deliberately developed and customized for our environment or our landscape. And it is what has got key pillars which we believe are driving our interventions. Having done the assessment of our cyber threat landscape, we have made deliberate efforts to look at some of the key areas that we need to have interventions so that we can protect our cyberspace. One of those is issues of protection of critical information infrastructure. The other one is cybercrime management. We also look at capacity and capability. This is about resources, persons, institutions, innovation, and so on to support our Kenyan ecosystem. We also look at collaboration and cooperation for where we need to do investigations of cyber crimes beyond our borders. So all these pillars are embedded in our strategy, and those are the ones that guide our activities. Of course, NC4 as a coordination framework is just in charge of just that, coordinating what is being done so that other entities that are in charge of various interventions can do their roles within their legal mandates. What is interesting is that based on previous experience, before the enactment of this act, we saw a lot of duplication of effort. And that, of course, was bringing in a lot of disparity, and that lack of synergy was making our efforts really futile in terms of combating cyber threats. So the strategy brings together all these entities with clear pillars, with clear intervention measures which are timelined and with resourcing, and a very clear mechanism for monitoring and evaluation of the delivery of those interventions.
Thank you so much for that. Now, going back to, you talked about the CMA, that is the Cybercrime Act of 2018.
CMCA.
Yeah. Now, as citizens of Kenya, we all know that sometimes we don't read the law, no one really cares, but then there's that time that we really need to go back and look at what the law says in terms of cybercrime. Do you think awareness has been created for the general public to make good use of this act? Because I've heard of cases where individuals have been compromised online or organizations have been compromised, but they don't know where to report. Does it mean that people don't know what the law says, or what's happening? Is government doing enough to create awareness about this act so that citizens know what to do in times when they're compromised?
Yeah, thank you for that. Yes, awareness is one of the key pillars of implementation of every initiative. And in terms of the Computer Misuse or Cybercrimes Act and regulations, awareness is key. Since enactment, again, it took quite some time for the law to be fully operational because of the previous challenges when it was initially inaugurated. But then the government has made quite some effort to sensitize the population in terms of the contents and the requirements for compliance with the law. However, awareness is not a one-off activity, and I can confirm that the government is continuously undertaking these awareness programs. Currently, in the regulations that have been recently published, it's actually a requirement of every owner of a critical information infrastructure to conduct adequate and suitable awareness to their stakeholders. So these are just some of the efforts just to make it specific so that cybersecurity challenges within the financial sector can be customized to customers or stakeholders within that sector. Then besides that, government has also taken a deliberate effort through frameworks to make sure that we have structured cybersecurity awareness programs which will be embedded within a lot of activities, including education programs from the early childhood all the way up to institutions of higher learning. Again, being a national security concern, we are also advocating for a lot of activities around conferences, workshops, seminars, and so on. And then as we also further implement the regulations and the law, we are also encouraging a lot of entities to help us in this space. And we've seen a lot of support from private sector organizations, including CSI, yourself. I think this discussion is part of those programs that we are encouraging collaboration in.
Thank you. Thank you for that. Now, let's move now to something that you've consistently mentioned in this discussion, that is the critical information infrastructure. Maybe to our viewers who are listening, what is a critical information infrastructure or critical national information infrastructure?
Okay, thank you. As a country, we depend on a lot of socioeconomic factors that form the pillars to provide what we call the critical services, the public goods that the citizens so require. These are services that citizens derive from healthcare, they derive from utilities, easy power, water, okay, and many others. With automation or digitalization for that matter, we see a lot of government systems as well as private sector provisioning goods and services on digital platforms. And the citizens have increasingly become dependent on this. So these are what we call critical information infrastructure. These are systems whose disruption would render the lives of individuals, of governments, of private businesses really unbearable because of the disruptions that go with them. One example is if you look at the tokening system for Kenya Power and Lighting Company, which we know every citizen depends on to purchase tokens for lighting and powering the equipment. So a disruption of such a system for 5 minutes or to 1 hour will really lead to disruption of many Kenyans not being able to access or top up, and you know what can go wrong. People will have people will be sitting in darkness. People cannot power the equipment. Some will not be able to, manage critical equipment like for healthcare and so on and so forth. So we look at this collection of ICTs and technologies systems that support the delivery of critical products as critical.
Thank you. I think now our viewers have a good understanding of what we mean by a critical national information infrastructure. And I'm now moving to the compliance. Now, how does compliance contribute to strengthening of cyber defenses and safeguarding organizations in Kenya? We have the regulatory framework, and you've talked comprehensively about them. So in terms of compliance, what do you expect?
Thank you. Now, compliance, I know, is a word that is not very friendly to a lot of people because of what is perceived as a burden that goes with its achievement. But let me say this. Every system has got the minimum set requirements for it to perform optimally for what it's supposed to do. So then now it means that there are entities charged with the responsibilities of defining the minimum performance level of these systems, as well as the minimum level of controls that should be implemented to protect these systems. So as a country, of course, Kenya works, the Kenyan economy comprises of various sectors. So we have various sectors with specific sector regulators who are in charge of implementation and maintenance of compliance to the various laws, regulations, standards, and so on. So within the cyberspace, or within the cybersecurity for that matter, we also have the suitable law, the regulations, as well as other instruments that define the minimum performance for various technology systems, security, because then that is our concern. For example, the regulator for telecommunication sector, Communication Authority, will have to define, the quality of service that each telecommunication service provider is supposed to meet. For us in cybersecurity, we define the minimum cybersecurity standards for such systems. So then it means that these service providers need to comply with those minimum standards or those minimum guidelines, which are embedded in our guidance notes or standards, policies, or the law as it is. So it is, of course, an area that is also a bit challenging to many people, but it is what brings order to the ecosystem. Technology is not Kenyan and is not only confined to Kenya. So compliance means that we are pushing all the stakeholders to comply or to meet the minimum standards which have been defined by local laws, international laws, as well as global best practices.
Now, that's a good discussion about compliance, but looking at when we were starting, we talked about the number of threats that have been detected by the KESAT. That was 1.2 billion. And looking at this and comparing this to compliance rates in Kenya, do you think we are doing well in terms of compliance, looking at all the organizations? Maybe let's say the most affected maybe sometimes is the financial sector or the banking sector. Are we really doing well in terms of ensuring that we enforce compliance? Because sometimes what I've seen, I'm also a practitioner in this domain. And normally what we've seen is that there's that time when there's rush to beat the deadline of compliance. And normally, organizations would bring people to carry out maybe security audits, vulnerability assessment, and penetration testing reports. But then do the regulators make sure that the reports that have been submitted by these organizations meet the minimum requirements? Because it's not just about submitting a report and saying, okay, we've submitted and we've met the compliance requirements.
Yeah, thank you for that. I think you mentioned that Kenya is ranked third in terms of the use of ICTs in Africa. I should say that Kenya is also ranked top 3 in terms of cybersecurity maturity in Africa. What it means is that I know a lot of cybersecurity efforts are government-driven, but within the technology space, we find a paradigm shift in that, where cybersecurity efforts, where we find industry is driving those efforts. Compliance, as we were discussing, is really not pushed so much by the regulators, but private sector, particularly, have deliberately adopted high level of compliance so that they can also improve on their competitiveness. So we see, let me give an example of financial sector, commercial banks, my insurance companies, and so on. These companies, especially the Kenyan banking sector or insurance companies, operate beyond the borders. And these are activities, these are sectors that are also guided by very strict regional and global compliance standards. So those factors really push these sectors to comply. And because when they comply, then they have better rating, which improves their competitiveness, they improve their customers' trust, and are able to minimize the losses that go with compromise of the digital platforms, as we've seen in areas or instances where organizations have not achieved some minimum qualifications. So those figures, yes, again, those figures talk about indicators of compromise or indicators or incidents for that matter. But I'm sure if we drill down into the real threats and the impacts of those threats, then I think we will be able to have some positive reporting that, well, there were some successful attacks, but the impact was not that huge, or the numbers of successful attacks were not that huge. Because when you are reporting, it's good to have all the reports where you can have some just for information, that there was an attempt on your firewall, but it was dropped, it failed. Or there was a malware, but it was detected and deleted timely before it could penetrate or it could affect your systems. So I would say that Kenya is actually doing well, but it's not enough. Much more efforts need to be done to improve the compliance levels. After all, the government is committed to have Kenya as a preferred destination for investments with the use of technology. So that security of cyberspace is one of those indicators that's going to attract investors in that space.
Okay, thank you. We've now been looking at compliance from the national perspective, looking at the regulations in place. But now there's also compliance at the organizational level, where we need organizations need to develop internal security policies and standards. Do you think organizations, in terms of those internal policies and standards, do you think they're doing enough? Do you think those internal policies are being implemented? Because before you go to the national level, you need to make sure that internally you have your own policies and they are being implemented to the letter.
Yeah, thank you. Just like in every ecosystem, we need to have proper oversight. We have entities or organizations that are doing very well in terms of self-regulation or internal controls, effective internal controls. But we're also aware of certain organizations that are not effective. They don't have adequate internal controls, and so on and so forth. So what we have done at NC4 as part of our regulatory framework is that those entities that have been designated as critical information infrastructure, they are mandated to internally conduct continuous assessments and continuous cybersecurity audits and report to Director NC4. Director NC4, in the new regulation, in the regulations that have just been published, there is an enhancement of that provision that the director may, validate those reporting. It is possible that some organizations will just be ticking boxes. for the purposes of compliance reporting. So the director will now go a step further to validate those reports. In fact, it is clear in the law that the director may not have to rely on the audit reports by those entities, that the NC4 director can appoint auditors to go and perform assessments of certain critical information infrastructure. And that can be done anytime. And that could be for the purposes of identifying various status or compliance levels.
Okay. Thank you for that. And now we've touched quite a lot on compliance. I don't know whether we can mention a few challenges in terms of organizations achieving compliance in general.
Okay. Number one challenge is that security is expensive. Okay. But lack of security is more expensive.
True.
So average organizations would look at the cost of security controls as expensive and therefore try to defer implementation of the same. They look at investment in security, in cybersecurity, as the additional overhead cost to them. That is in terms of technical controls. In terms of human resources, again, organizations have not invested enough in cybersecurity professionals as part of their internal staff to support the cybersecurity activities. So one of the provisions that have come out clearly in the regulations is that owners of critical information infrastructure must appoint a chief information security officer who is competent for that task. Again, that is going to be an overhead to these entities. But from the overall assessment, the cost of lack of this compliance has been very heavy, especially for the various stakeholders and the public. Therefore, it is a bitter pill to swallow, but it's necessary because of the long-term gains that go with the compliance environment.
Thank you. You've mentioned about the cybersecurity workforce. The Seriani report that we mentioned at the beginning was talking about 4,000 professionals, cybersecurity professionals in Kenya, which to me I think we need to do more, or maybe we have a number of Kenyan people that have been trained as cybersecurity professionals, and maybe we don't have that data. But I think we really need to do more in terms of training our cybersecurity workforce to help us achieve compliance. Now, there is something in cybersecurity, proactive and reactive response. Do you want to tell us more about it? And because we are Kenyans, and we always know that we wait until something happens, and then that's when we now start to respond. What would you tell us about a proactive and reactive response when it comes to cybersecurity?
All right. Interesting. Yes. Again, reactive approach is the lazy man's approach, what we call the firefighting approach, where all is well until something happens. What I like giving a quote for my village, where we come from, a lake next to a river. Because the river is quiet, does not mean the crocodiles have left. So we are really pushing for a proactive approach to cybersecurity management, and this has been seen as a new dimension or a new approach globally. Before, there was a lot of dependence on SATs, incident response teams. I think that was the turning point, that people believe that we just need to invest in incident response teams. So going forward, the government is leading a campaign, a national campaign towards pushing for a proactive approach. Now, proactive approach requires continuous monitoring of our cyberspace, basically having visibility of our technologies or our technical systems, especially the critical information infrastructure. To that end, the government has given directives in the regulations that we must invest in tools and technologies that will promote proactive management of the cyberspace. These tools are what we call cybersecurity operational centers. So the regulations provide for cybersecurity operational centers at 3 levels, starting with the national level, which will be getting feeds from the sectorial cybersecurity operational centers for the various sectors, and sectors will be getting feeds from cybersecurity operational centers from the various entities under those sectors. This is one of the ways, because a SOC has got capabilities for continuous monitoring of the cyberspace. Therefore, you'll be seeing a lot of indicators of compromise, a lot of vulnerabilities, and with proper sharing of information across sectors, across entities, it will be easy to thwart some of these attacks before they really happen.
Thank you. You mentioned about the SOCs. I think a SOC is a good tool that can give us at least an overview of what's happening. To our viewers, SOC is a security operations center. Now, in compliance, what many organizations call compliance, according to what I've seen outside here, is about someone will tell you, you're telling us about standards or policies, but we have a firewall, we have an intrusion detection system, we have an intrusion prevention systems. But in as much as you might have the tools, I think what people fail to do sometimes is that before you buy a tool, you need to assess the risks that you have as an organization. What is the impact of those risks to your organization? And then now, when you're going to buy a tool, you make an informed decision of what tool you need to buy based on the risks and the impact that these risks have to your organization. So that is just something that I wanted to add. I don't know whether you want to add something on that before we proceed.
Yeah, that is right. Again, in my thinking philosophy, I look at the fact that we start with really what do we require. We don't start with the tool that's available. So in cybersecurity, basically we are looking at protection of our critical information assets from compromises of integrity, confidentiality, and availability. So then now the business organization needs to define what are the cybersecurity challenges that they're facing, so that now they're able to acquire the suitable technical control. So yes, the approach should be we move from a problem that they've identified to the relevant solution for the same. But then again, technical controls are as good as their adaptation, how best they've been adapted to the environment in terms of configuration, integration, and management.
Okay, thank you. Now, new and emerging technologies in cybersecurity. Every day we have got new and emerging attacks. We have what we call the zero-day attacks. Sometimes these are things that come unexpectedly, and sometimes we do not know how to defend against such attacks. In terms of new and emerging cybersecurity technologies and threats, and looking at that with regulations, what do you think needs to be done? Because tomorrow there will be new threats, tomorrow there will be new technologies, and technology changes so fast than the regulations.
Yeah, I think technology is something that's really challenging everyone. It's even challenging the developers of the same technology. I think last year I was watching a talk show by the American tech giants where they were saying, gentlemen, we must sit and stop and think that the technology that we have developed ourselves is moving faster than us, and that they are referring to artificial intelligence, that they're not able to control the technology that themselves have developed, and that is ridiculous. Again, that is something that is really inevitable. But we cannot run away from the technology. In fact, the rapid change of technology is a good thing, because it means that technology is giving us new and better capabilities. But then as that happens, it is also introducing new and more complex challenges. So knowing that scenario, then it means that we really need to have a very agile team. That is why supporting cybersecurity initiatives or supporting ICT adaptation requires a very agile research and development team that is also keeping tab of what is happening and being able to look at what can be addressed in terms of those challenges that come with new technologies. Yes, we may not get the solution for the new challenges today, But knowing that there's a security challenge of a new technology is important so that the security innovators can continuously be looking at how do we develop a solution to this new challenge. So it is an area that requires real agility in terms of identifying the opportunities. I don't call them challenges, let me call them opportunities to improve the security of the new technologies.
Okay. Thank you for that on new and emerging technologies in cybersecurity. Now, I want to move to something that really affect the citizens directly. And now, we are in a digital era. And if you look at the smartphone penetration in Kenya, at least today, everyone is able to access the internet because of the 3G, 4G, and at least now we have the 5G network technologies. And with this, it means the threat landscape or the cyber landscape, we have increased the attack surface for everyone. Now, every Kenyan today is on social media, be it Facebook, be it Instagram, TikTok, and all these. And with this, I think a lot of social engineering attacks have been reported. Or we hear about them, or you go online and you see this so-and-so has been conned, or so-and-so, and so all that is happening. Now, I want us to discuss whether reporting of cybercrime is anchored in the law, and what are these steps that the citizens can take to report cybercrime cases, things like social engineering, SIM swaps, and all that.
Okay. Thank you for that. Now, if you look at the primary law for cybersecurity, that is the Computer Misuse and Cyber Crimes Act, Section 14 to Section 46, for that matter, talk about the various computer cyber crimes. There are 32 cyber crimes that have been defined by the law. So we know, of course, there are other instruments which talk about indicators of those cyber crimes, which for an ordinary citizen, because sometimes some of these crimes or some of these incidents need to be investigated to confirm if they were a real threat, and if it's a real threat, if it occurred. Because it could be an incident, it could be an indication of an incident, but it did not occur. Therefore, there's nothing much to worry about in terms of victims. So, because of this and the various levels of our citizens, we're talking about Mama Mboga, the border riders, our old mothers and grandmothers in the village, and so on and so forth, who are also running, who are also having mobile phones, they're even transacting on mobile money and so on. So we have put the mechanism for reporting for indicators of compromise. So the regulations are very categorical in terms of what needs to be reported. For example, when you see a compromise on your various identities, because identity theft and the authentication that go with it are some of the ways of real perpetrating cybercrime. So all those, including loss of devices and many others, have been listed in the regulations in terms of what somebody needs to report on. We encourage citizens to report anything that is around all those ones, all those symptoms, whether they're real or not, for the purposes of investigation, because that will help. It may not happen today, but from that indication, it means that it can happen tomorrow successfully to somebody else. So the law also provides various mechanisms for reporting, including from the most basic level. One of the good things is that, of course, every cybercrime is like any other crime. In Kenya, crimes are looked at differently because of how they are caused and how they are treated. So every crime is supposed to be reported to the National Police Service. But the law, the cyber crimes management regulations have come out clearly to establish now a cyber crimes desk. So every police station, every police patrol base, or every police post is supposed to have a cyber crimes desk for the purposes of providing officers, police officers, that is, who understand the subject matter of cybersecurity. So citizens are encouraged to report through police stations, apart from other existing platforms such as SMS, telephone or web portals for reporting the same.
Okay, thank you for that. Something that with the interactions that I have with people outside there, sometimes we receive the calls, this has happened, and you direct them to the police stations. They make these reports, but then nothing is done. That marks the end of that case. But I also think that, as you have said, we need to train our officers because this is a new sort of crime. We need to train them to understand what is this cyber crime, how does it happen, how can these systems be compromised, so that when our citizens report, they report to people who understand what a cyber crime is. Now, as we will have another session just to talk about social engineering, because that's another topic altogether for listeners to understand what is social engineering, how do we protect ourselves from social engineering and all that. But now as we come to the close of this session, what do you want to tell Kenyans in terms of the regulations, in terms of compliance, and what do we need? What do we expect with the regulations?
Thank you very much. Like I mentioned at the beginning, cybersecurity is national security, and security starts with you and me. Cybersecurity is really cutting across all individuals, all organizations, all entities, both public and private. Therefore, all of us need to have the collective responsibility of one, conforming with the prescribed standards of security, two, acting responsibly within the digital space, because it is some of our irresponsible behavior that causes further cybersecurity challenges. Three is to be aware about these laws, improve our cyber hygiene. With improved cyber hygiene, as a society, as a country, we will be more familiar with some of these threats, and we will be able to detect them timely, report them, and avoid the ones that can be avoided, like the ones you mentioned around social engineering. It's high time that we started ignoring those people who send us fictitious SMSs to send money to some of those accounts, because, again, that is one of the oldest social engineering fraudulent attacks, and to our dismay, that those attackers are still successful at this time and age. So if we all take the collective responsibility for getting the correct information, reporting, sharing that information, and putting in the necessary control measures, then I think we will be able to fight this cyber war, to fight these cyber crimes activities together. That is not enough. Apart from the laws, we also need to embrace a lot of attitude and embracing of the technical controls, which might not be basic to a lot of citizens, but then we leave that responsibility to the institutions that are in the services of providing critical infrastructure, and so on and so forth. So Kenyans really need to embrace a very, very rapid transformation in terms of the attitude, in terms of the cyber culture and hygiene, in terms of working collaboratively so that we can report some of these incidents for the purposes of improving the threat landscape. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dr. David Njoga, for your valuable insights about this subject matter of looking at compliance in focus and focusing mainly on the regulations, cybersecurity regulations in Kenya. And thanks to our listeners, we'll have more episodes touching on different topics in cybersecurity. Please subscribe. Thank you.
Thank you.